For years, I paid my son's bills, raised his twins 3 afternoons a week, and kept my front door open for the woman he married. I told myself I was helping family. I told myself love sometimes meant making life easier for people you loved. Then, one Sunday evening, they sat across from me at my own dining table and explained that my house, my savings, and even the years I had left were already part of their financial plan. The roast chicken was still warm when Mara unzipped a black leather portfolio. My son Ethan stared at his water glass. That should have warned me. Mara never brought paperwork to dinner unless she had already decided the outcome. We were gathered around the mahogany table in the craftsman house where I had lived for 30 years. First with my husband Thomas, and then alone after he died. Autumn rain tapped softly against the windows. The candles were almost burned down. My granddaughter Lily had left a purple hair tie beside her plate, and her twin brother Noah had abandoned a half-eaten dinner roll beneath his napkin. Ordinary things, family things. Then Mara placed 3 color-coded spreadsheets beside the gravy boat. "We've spent the last month reviewing the family assets," she said. I looked at Ethan. He didn't meet my eyes. Mara slid one sheet toward me. The first column listed the estimated value of my house. The second listed my certificates of deposit. The third listed my retirement account. At the bottom, someone had calculated what I would receive if I sold the house, moved into a smaller senior apartment, and transferred the remaining equity to Ethan. I stared at the number. "What's this?" Mara smiled as if I had asked for a weather forecast. "A transition plan." "A transition?" "You've had your knee surgery. You know maintenance is getting harder. The market is strong right now. Ethan and I thought this was the best moment to simplify everything." She tapped another page. "Your house could sell for more than we expected. That equity could clear our mortgage and cover private school tuition for the twins." I looked down. There it was, written in neat blue type. My life had become a column in a spreadsheet. "And where would I go?" I asked. Mara pushed a brochure across the table. "Shady Pines." I almost laughed. The brochure showed smiling seniors drinking coffee beneath a picture of a swimming pool. "You've already picked the place?" We were trying to think ahead. Ethan finally spoke. "Mom, it's not like we're taking everything. You'll have enough for yourself." I looked at my son. The little boy who once waited by the porch steps for his father to come home. The teenager who asked me to help with chemistry homework at midnight. The man Thomas and I had spent decades trying to raise into someone decent. He was sitting there while his wife divided my life into percentages. "You planned this together," I said. Ethan swallowed. "We thought it made sense." I folded my napkin. I didn't yell, I didn't cry. I picked up my water and took a slow drink. Then I smiled. "All right," I said. Mara relaxed. Ethan looked relieved. Neither of them understood that my answer was not surrender. It was acknowledgement. After they left, I stood alone in the kitchen and listened to the old grandfather clock ticking down the hall. For the first time, I saw every small thing clearly. Mara's demands had not begun that night. 4 years earlier, when she married Ethan, she had called me Mom within a week. At first, it felt sweet. Then Mom became, could you pick up Lily and Noah? Could you keep them Tuesday and Thursday? Could you cover Ethan's car repair? Could you put the family phones on your plan? It's cheaper. Could you pay the landscaper this month? Ethan's bonus was delayed. Could you let me use the guest room for staging boxes? Could you write a check for the twins' summer camp? We'll reimburse you. They almost never reimbursed me. I didn't notice the pattern because every request came wrapped in affection. I had been a middle school science teacher for 32 years. I understood biology. I understood chemistry. I understood gravity. What I had failed to understand was entitlement. It grows slowly. First, people lean on you. Then they stop asking whether you're willing to carry them. Eventually, they assume you were built for the job. The worst part was Ethan. He had once been independent. After Thomas died, Ethan had sat beside me on the back steps and promised, "Mom, you'll never have to handle everything alone." Somewhere along the way, that promise changed into the opposite. Now he let Mara handle him. And Mara had discovered that letting me handle everything was even easier. I went upstairs, opened the desk drawer in Thomas's old study, and pulled out the copy of our estate plan. Thomas and I had created it years earlier. Everything went to Ethan: the house, the investments, the accounts. My financial power of attorney would eventually pass to him. I had thought I was giving my only child security. That night, I finally understood something painful. I had not given Ethan a future. I had given him an expectation. The next morning, I called Daniel Mercer. Daniel had handled Thomas's estate after his death. He was older now, thinner through the face, with silver hair and the same precise eyes. I sat across from him in his downtown office. "I want to change everything," I said. He removed his glasses. "Everything?" "Everything that can legally be changed." He studied me for a long moment. "This isn't a decision you should make out of anger." "I agree." "Then what is it?" I looked toward the window. "Clarity." For 2 hours, we worked through every asset: my house, my retirement savings, my municipal bonds, my certificates of deposit, the accounts I had opened with Ethan when he was younger. Daniel explained each option carefully. We created an irrevocable trust. The house would no longer be something Ethan could inherit as cash whenever I died. During my lifetime, it would remain my home. After my death, the property would transfer to the Franklin Urban Conservatory, where the land would be used to support a community garden and science education program. It felt strangely right. Thomas had loved gardening. I had spent my career teaching children to be curious about the world. Maybe our home could keep doing that long after I was gone. "What about Ethan?" Daniel asked. "He has children." "Yes." "I don't want to punish them for their parents' choices." So we created an education fund for Lily and Noah. When they turned 18, the trust could pay accredited colleges directly for tuition and required educational expenses. Ethan would not control the money. Mara would not control it. The twins would benefit. Their parents would have no checkbook to cash. I also revoked Ethan's future medical and financial power of attorney. Those responsibilities would go to an independent fiduciary through Daniel's firm. Daniel paused before signing the final pages. "You understand that once this is executed, changing some of these terms will be difficult." "I understand." "And you believe you are mentally competent to make this decision?" "I know I am." Still, I scheduled a cognitive evaluation with my physician, not because I doubted myself, because I had learned that when people want your property badly enough, they may eventually try to convince everyone that you aren't capable of understanding what you're doing. I wanted my answer documented before anyone asked the question. By Tuesday, I began removing the invisible supports holding Ethan's household together. I called the elementary school. "I need to be removed from the daily pickup authorization," I said. The secretary sounded surprised. "Is everything okay?" "Yes, I'm simply no longer available." Then I called the phone company. I moved Ethan and Mara's lines to separate billing. Next came the landscaping service, then the joint savings account I had opened with Ethan when he started college. The account held only a modest amount, but I closed it anyway. It was mine. All of it was mine. At 3:20 that afternoon, Mara called. "Mom, the school says you're not picking up the kids." "I'm not. I have a client walk through in 20 minutes. "I know. What am I supposed to do? Use the after-school program? It costs $800 a month. Then you and Ethan will need to budget for it." There was a silence. "You're doing this because of Sunday." "No," I said. "I'm doing this because Sunday showed me how much of my life I have been giving away." She hung up. I expected guilt. Instead, I felt relief. Wednesday morning, I cleaned my garage. I found gardening tools Thomas hadn't used in years, duplicate dishes, boxes of old linens, and things I had stored simply because I had nowhere else to put them. I loaded what I could into my Subaru and drove downtown to a women's shelter. The volunteer who helped me unload smiled when she saw the gardening tools. "These will get used quickly." I almost cried, not because I was sad, because I realized my things could still be useful without being owned by people who expected them. That afternoon, I returned to Daniel's office. 2 paralegals served as witnesses while I signed page after page. The trust was funded. The deed was transferred. The new powers of attorney were executed. The old documents were revoked. Daniel arranged for certified notices to be sent. I signed 12 separate places. Each signature felt like setting down a heavy stone. What I had not told Ethan and Mara that Sunday was that I had kept records for years. Not because I expected betrayal, because teaching had trained me to document things, dates, receipts, agreements, patterns. Every time Ethan asked me to cover a bill, I wrote the date in a small notebook Thomas had given me. Every payment for the phone plan, every month of lawn service, every transfer toward camp fees. I never used the notebook against my son. I simply kept it. Daniel found it useful. When I showed him the pages, he looked up at me. "You've been subsidizing their household for quite a while." "I suppose I have." "Do you know how much?" I did. I had never added it because I didn't want the total to become emotionally important. Daniel added it anyway. The number surprised me, not because I couldn't afford it, because I suddenly understood what it represented. Years of saying yes. Years of telling myself that an occasional check wasn't worth arguing over. Years of leaving my calendar empty because somebody else's schedule mattered more. It wasn't the money that hurt, it was the time. When I retired, I thought I was giving myself time. Instead, I had handed most of it to people who treated it like a free service. That realization changed the way I saw the trust. I wasn't trying to punish Ethan. I was restoring a boundary that should have existed before the first check was ever written. Daniel also helped me create one more safeguard. A letter, not a legal document, just a personal statement explaining why I had changed my estate plan. I wrote it myself. I wrote that I was mentally competent, that no one had pressured me, that my decision was based on years of observation, not one angry evening. I wrote that I loved Ethan. I wrote that I loved Lily and Noah. I wrote that I hoped Ethan would someday understand that security built from another person's surrender was not security at all. Daniel placed the letter with the trust documents. "Your future self will be glad you wrote this," he said. I smiled. "My future self will probably be too busy gardening." That was the first time I laughed in his office. There was another thing I changed. I stopped giving explanations for ordinary boundaries. When I couldn't answer a call, I didn't explain why. When I wanted an afternoon to myself, I didn't apologize. When Mara texted asking whether I could watch the twins on a Saturday, I simply replied, "No, I have plans." The first time I wrote those words, I stared at the screen for almost a minute. I had no plans. My plan was to sit in my garden and read a mystery novel. That was enough. The second time it felt easier. The third time it felt normal. That was how freedom returned. Not dramatically. In small permissions. I gave myself permission to disappoint people. I gave myself permission to be unavailable. I gave myself permission to spend money on myself without calculating whether someone else might need it more. One Saturday, I bought a new pair of walking shoes. The old ones still worked. The cashier asked whether I wanted the extended warranty. I laughed. "No, I'm trying to simplify." She smiled. "Good for you." I walked out carrying the box, and realized that I had not felt guilty once. When it was over, Daniel placed a sealed medical evaluation beside the file. "You were right to do this," he said. I looked at the report. "People don't challenge boundaries when they respect them." "No," he said. "They challenge them when they believe you won't enforce them." Thursday morning, I woke before sunrise. For the first time in years, I drank coffee without checking the clock. I walked through the house slowly. Mara had taken over the guest room for her real estate staging supplies. Plastic tubs, fake plants, throw pillows, cheap framed prints. Every surface had become storage. I carried everything to the covered porch. Then I called a locksmith. Ethan and Mara had known my electronic door code for years. They could walk into my kitchen without knocking. Sometimes they arrived before I was dressed. Sometimes they let themselves in while I was napping. I had convinced myself it was normal. The locksmith installed a new deadbolt. One code, mine. At 2:15, my phone buzzed. It was Ethan. "Mom, the phone company says you've removed us." I didn't answer immediately. Another message arrived. "Mara says the landscaper quit on us." I wrote back, I've separated our household accounts. You and Mara are responsible for your own services from now on. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Nothing else. Friday morning, the legal notices arrived at their house. At 9:17, Daniel's office emailed me confirmation, delivered. At 9:42, my landline rang. I didn't answer. Mara's voice filled the voicemail. Margaret, this is ridiculous. We received legal documents saying your house is in an irrevocable trust. This has to be a mistake. Call Daniel immediately. Brian is furious. Then Ethan came on. Mom, please call me. That hurt more than Mara's anger. Not because I wanted him to inherit everything, because I wanted him to understand what had happened. I sat by the window and watched rain darken the maple trees. I thought about calling. I didn't. At 11, a white SUV pulled into my driveway. Mara got out first. Ethan followed. They walked toward my front door in the rain. Mara punched the old code into the keypad. The lock beeped. Access denied. She tried again. Nothing. I watched from behind the curtain. Mara knocked, then she pounded. Margaret! I waited. Another blow. Open the door. I put on my cardigan. I checked the clock. 11:15. Then I opened the inner door. Mara froze. Thank goodness, she said. We need to fix this. No, I said. She held out the folder. You cannot do this. We had an agreement. We had dinner. You know what I mean. I do. Ethan finally stepped forward. Mom, we thought you were struggling. We thought you needed help. I looked at him. Did you ask? He lowered his eyes. No. That is the problem. Mara's voice sharpened. You're throwing your only son away because your feelings were hurt. No, I looked at her. I am protecting what remains of my life because you both started planning for my death while I was sitting beside you. Her face changed. We weren't planning for you to die. You brought me a price for my house and a brochure for where I should live. You're being dramatic. I'm being specific. I took the folder from her hand. The house stood behind me. Thomas's photographs were still on the hallway wall. The marks on the kitchen doorway where we had measured Ethan's height as a child were still there. Everything they wanted to liquidate was still alive. This house isn't an inheritance, I said. It is my home. Ethan looked at the papers. What happens to Lily and Noah? They have an education fund. He stared at me. Through the trust. Yes. Mara's expression hardened. So they get everything eventually. They get education. And we get nothing. You get the responsibility of providing for your own family. She looked at me as if I had insulted her. Ethan whispered, Mom. I waited. He took a breath. I never thought you'd choose strangers over us. I didn't choose strangers. I said it gently. I chose myself. That silenced both of them. Rain dripped from Mara's hair. Ethan looked at the new lock. Then he looked back at me. I'm sorry, he said. Mara turned sharply. Brian? Ethan, I corrected automatically. He nodded. I'm sorry. I believed he meant it. But apology and consequence are not the same thing. I hope you mean that, I said. But it doesn't undo what you did. What do you want us to do? Leave. He nodded. Mara didn't. She looked past me toward the hallway. Your house was supposed to come to Ethan. It was. Her face brightened for half a second. Then I said, that was before I learned what you planned to do with it while I was still alive. She had no answer. I stepped aside long enough to point toward the covered porch. Your staging supplies are there. Mara stared. You expect us to take them? They are yours. Ethan picked up 2 tubs. He carried them down the steps. Mara stood there another moment. Then she followed. I closed the door, locked it, and waited until their car disappeared. The house became silent again, but it was a different silence, not lonely, free. On Tuesday, I went to my pottery class. I was terrible at it. My first bowl collapsed in the middle. Everyone laughed, including me. On Wednesday, I attended orientation at the conservatory. A volunteer coordinator showed me the greenhouse and the small plots where children from local schools would grow tomatoes, beans, herbs, and sunflowers. I stood beside a row of seedlings. "They'll need someone to teach the kids about soil," she said. "I can do that." On Thursday, my retired teacher's book club came to my house. I had not hosted them in 2 years because I was always babysitting, cleaning, or running errands for Ethan and Mara. 6 women sat around my dining table. Someone brought pie, someone else brought wine. We laughed until my sides hurt. No one asked what my house was worth. No one asked what they were inheriting. They asked whether I was happy. For the first time in a long time, I could answer honestly. Yes. A month later, Ethan called, not to ask for money, not to complain about the trust. He asked if he could come over alone. I agreed. He arrived carrying a small paper bag. Inside was a framed photograph of Thomas painting the porch when Ethan was 12. "I found this in the garage," he said. I smiled. "I remember that day." He nodded. "I don't." "You were covered in green paint." I probably was. We sat at the kitchen table. He looked older, not physically, in the way people look after consequences finally catch up with them. "I was wrong," he said. I didn't rescue him from the discomfort. He continued. "I let Mara plan everything. I kept telling myself it wasn't greed because it was family." I said nothing. I was scared about money, the mortgage, the twins, school. I understand fear. But I used your generosity as a solution. I looked at my son. For years, I had confused protecting him with loving him. Maybe those were different things. "I love you," I said. He looked up. "But loving you doesn't mean financing your choices." "I know. And the trust isn't changing." "I know," he nodded. That was the first time I believed him. Later that spring, Lily and Noah visited with him. They ran through the garden. Lily found the old stones Thomas had used to edge the flower beds. Noah asked why the house would someday belong to a conservatory. I crouched beside him. "Because Grandpa loved plants," I said. "And because Grandma wants kids to learn things here." He smiled. "Can we grow something?" "You can." So we planted sunflowers. When they left, Ethan hugged me at the front door. This time, he knocked before entering. That small thing meant more to me than an apology. Weeks passed. The twins started school again. Ethan and Mara learned to manage their own bills. The sky did not fall. My house remained standing. My savings remained protected. My life became mine again. Sometimes I still think about that Sunday dinner. About the spreadsheets, the brochure, the way Ethan stared at his water glass because he couldn't look at me. I don't hate them. Hate would make them too important. What I learned was simpler. Generosity is supposed to be given. The moment people begin treating it as an obligation, it stops being generosity. Family should never mean surrendering your dignity. And the future is not something other people get to divide while you're still alive. One evening, I stood on my porch as the sun went down. Across the street, the maple trees glowed gold. I could hear children laughing at the conservatory garden 2 blocks away. My phone rested quietly in my pocket. No one needed anything. No emergency, no request, no bill, just quiet. I looked at the front door, at the new lock, at the worn brass handle Thomas had installed 30 years earlier. I thought about the woman who had once believed keeping peace was worth almost anything. I barely recognized her. Then I went inside. I made tea. I opened my planner. Under tomorrow's date, I had written one simple sentence: "Teach the children how seeds become forests." I smiled. My life was still mine, and that was an inheritance no one could take from me.